Brutal honesty with Trent Erickson. Girls can tell. Try not to take it personally.
Here's a weird thing about leaving a place you didn't even like. You start missing it. Not just the good parts, but the whole mess of it. The noise, the quirks, the anxious nights, the routines you swore you couldn't wait to escape. Nostalgia tricks you into remembering the story without the struggle. This episode is about why our brains do this, why it's almost impossible to appreciate your life while it's happening, why time speeds up the older you get, and why the things that annoyed you might end up being the most memorable times of our lives. I'm standing in my old apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes and familiar street sounds below. Holly, my dog, curled up under the window, keeping an eye out for squirrels, skateboarders, and any horseplay on the sidewalks, like a furry 40-pound four-legged security guard. I walked the rooms one last time, looking for something I couldn't define. Before moving, everything was a hassle. The endless hunt for quiet, the annoying, obnoxious neighbors. I didn't expect a surge of memories. All the people that passed through that space, the late-night walks, movies with friends, the hours of endless conversations, and Holly's daily rituals. All that happened within those four walls. And the thing is, in those moments I didn't feel grateful or present. I was distracted, anxious, and wishing for something better. It all seemed ordinary. I often find myself saying, I've never lived a moment in my life. Not really. And maybe that sounds dramatic, but my point is, while the great stuff is happening, I don't recognize it as great. It's only when I look back that I realize that was the time. That was the good stuff. Turns out, there's a psychological reason for this. Psychologist David Kahneman calls it the experiencing versus remembering self. The experiencing self lives through the moments while they're happening, but the remembering self is the one who picks which memories shine and which fade. Your present doesn't come with a highlight reel, you're just getting through another Tuesday. And maybe it's not just me. Maybe you've had those stretches, a vacation, a relationship, a random string of ordinary days, when only afterwards you realized they were something special. In that moment, you were checking email, thinking about laundry, waiting for real life to start. Our brains are weird. They like to edit trauma and inconvenience, recasting hassle as charm. There's something called peak end theory. We tend to remember the emotional highs and how things ended, while the rough parts blur into the background. Hearing all those planes flying into O'Hare 24 hours a day right over my building I hated, now I kind of miss the sound of jet engines overhead on quiet nights. That neighbor whose TV bled through the wall, the background soundtrack of a life lived alongside mine. Holly's squirrel patrol, what used to be an annoying distraction, is now a treasured ritual. Funny how annoyance ages into affection. There's another trick our minds play. The older you get, the faster time seems to fly. When you're young, novelty slows everything down. Each day is packed with firsts. The brain keeps track. But as you settle into routine, weeks start to blur and years vanish and fast forward. Psychologists call this proportional theory. The ratio of 1 year to your entire life shrinks as you age. In childhood, a summer feels endless. Now, a summer feels like 3 calendar appointments and a couple of DoorDash deliveries. That's why, after I moved out, the years in that apartment collapse into a handful of scenes, and the rest just falls away. Some of my favorite memories come from places I never thought I'd miss, like the nights I had friends over, passing around food, mid-conversation, Holly barks at skateboarders going by outside, or the time the power went out and we huddled near the windows talking by cell phone light. Moments that seemed meh in real time, but now they anchor the whole era. And those weird, small frustrations are part of it too. Even the mechanical noise, the people shouting on the street, somehow they give the memories depth. Here's what really bugs me. Across those years, I spent so much energy on things that don't matter now. I worried about apartment noise, the future, the logistics of moving, how people saw me, if Holly felt at home. Most of it fades out in hindsight. How much of our short time gets wasted worrying about things that, in retrospect, never really mattered? I get the sense it's a collective habit. Whole generations romanticize tough times. They remember the good old days, even while history tells us those days were definitely not good at all. 100 years, if you're lucky, and it goes by in an instant. Most of us won't get there. Science shows perception changes as we age. Routine compresses memory. Your brain logs fewer snapshots, so you feel like you're flipping through the calendar faster every year. Childhood summers lasted forever because everything was new. Now, adult years vanish into chunks you barely remember. The more you break routine, the more time feels full again. But the default is letting routine flatten the days. Psychologists say nostalgia is protective, not just sentimental. It softens pain, gives hard times narrative value, helps us make sense of chaos. We're built to live life forward, but only understand it backward. We carry the mess because it's ours. Moving out doesn't mean forgetting. It's a chance to decide what stays with you as you build the next chapter. Here's a confession I've made before on the show, that I've never lived a moment in my life. I mean that literally. I've spent decades moving through experiences without actually being present for them, always narrating what might happen next, always waiting for the real version of my life to start. And now I'm looking back at years in the apartment, years I spent wishing I was somewhere else, and realizing those were the real years. I just couldn't see it while I was in them. Let me tell you something most people don't talk about. Sometimes I don't just miss the moment, I barely feel like I'm living it at all. It's called derealization. Imagine moving through your life like it's a movie set. You there, but everything feels distant or slightly unreal. Like a scene you're watching instead of acting in. Like you're once removed from every situation. I've realized that this numbness comes from a lifetime of things never feeling the way I think they're supposed to feel, or I thought they would feel. You build up an idea of how a vacation, a milestone, a party, even a simple day should feel. But too often, reality doesn't deliver that intensity or joy or that connection you thought it would. So over time, you start expecting less and less. Eventually, to protect yourself, you turn off anticipation entirely. You stop expecting joy or hoping for connection, because if you don't expect it, you can't be disappointed. And that's when the derealization comes in, when you numb yourself to what's happening in real time so you don't feel let down. The thing is, when I look back, I feel regret. Not only because the moment was wasted, but because I never even opened myself to it in the first place. I didn't let myself hope for joy or connection, so I couldn't be disappointed. Instead of not appreciating it, I was numb to it. Research shows our strongest memories come from our emotional highs, lows, and endings, not from average moments. So most of us walk through life half numb, only realizing the meaning later, when our brains have time to write the story. Derealization is often a defense mechanism. When emotional experience doesn't match expectations, the brain pulls back. It blunts sensation and engagement as a way to manage pain or disappointment. It's correlated with chronic stress, emotional burnout, and unfulfilled longing for what those big moments are supposed to deliver. I'm not alone in this. Many people quietly admit they feel numb or disconnected in situations where others seem to be living it up. The paradox is, sometimes our greatest regrets aren't for moments we missed, but for feelings we never let ourselves expect. So, if you relate, if you move through seasons in a fog, wondering why nothing feels quite right as it happens, know that it's not just you. It's a mix of how we're wired, how our minds shield us from disappointment, and maybe an invitation to slowly expect more again. If you find yourself looking back, rewriting the story to give those moments meaning. Maybe take that as proof that you want to feel things deeply. And maybe, even now, you're closer to being in the moment than you think by wanting something real instead of just letting numbness dominate those moments. So, what bad places do you find yourself missing? What pointless worries would you go back and reclaim that time from if you could? As I settle into my new place, making new routines with Holly, I know someday I'll look back on today and think, that was precious too. Maybe perfect presence isn't possible, but I'm trying to do better, to notice more, to stop waiting for life to feel like it's supposed to feel and just be in it. Even when I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be feeling, our lives are just a collection of ordinary moments, half remembered, half missed. And maybe that's what makes them beautiful.